it feels really hard to turn the lens inward when your attention just wants to focus on whomever hurt you, but they're powerless to heal you. Like that can only really come from within you. So being able to accept that and also understanding that anyone who arrives to any relationship is
Hmm.
going to arrive with imperfection. They're going to arrive with past pain. They're going to arrive with unconscious behaviors.
Yeah.
And hopefully, they also arrive with the humility to want to learn. Like, I want to learn how to support your happiness because I may feel strongly for you, but I don't necessarily know how to care for you.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terry Cole Show. What a treat I have for you today. You may have heard of my next guest as Yung Pueblo. I actually knew him because of Instagram, and then we ended up having mutual friends. That's his pen name. His real name is Diego Perez. And he is number one New York Times bestselling author. He's sold over 1.5 million books worldwide that have been translated into 25 languages. And his work is so, to me, so authentic, so beautiful, so moving. He focuses on the power of self-healing, creating healthy relationships, and the wisdom that comes from when we truly work on knowing ourselves. And we talk quite a bit about his new book that is out right now called How to Love Better. It's really all about relationships and love. We had such a great conversation. So I hope that you enjoyed this interview with Yung Pueblo, aka Diego, as much as I enjoyed spending time with him. I'm so excited to welcome Diego, aka Yung Pueblo, to the Terry Cole Show. Welcome.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for having me. So excited to be speaking with you.
Oh my God, dude. I have to say, just years ago, I mean, and I know
Mm.
everyone has their Yung Pueblo story of like, when did you enter my consciousness?
Yeah.
But everything that you were putting online, and this is years
Mm.
ago now, just resonated like a train was running me over. I was like, that's so true. Oh my God. Or I never thought about it that exact way. And I'm so interested in, and so obviously, so are lots of other people in the world, but the original thinking, and there's especially right now,
Mm.
we're in such a rough time of, I hope, expansion. I hope, there's stuff happening in the world that your voice is just soothing. It's salve for the soul. So thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. It's such a compliment coming from you too. I'm glad that the stuff resonates because I put things out there and it just goes into the ether, and I don't know how things will be received, and if I
Totally.
mean my first instance of even putting things out online was like, does this make sense to other people? Like, am I
Yeah.
communicating myself well? And then things grew from there.
And then the answer was a resounding yes. And here we
Yeah.
are. All right. So much happening. You have a new book dropping on March 11th. Very exciting. You have other books as well. But I'm curious, before we get into the new book, I would just
Hmm.
want to talk about how did if you were a Marvel movie character, right, how they all have these origin stories, what
Yeah.
would Diego's origin story be?
Oh, that's a great question. So my origin story really revolves around immigrating to the United States when I was 4 years old. So I was born in Ecuador, in Guayaquil, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity there for us. So my dad and my mom felt like they should just take that big risk and take that big leap to see. It feels like they just rolled the dice.
Yeah.
And we ended up growing up in Boston. And when we were there was just so much poverty. It was just like
Mm.
my mom was cleaning houses, my dad was working at a supermarket, and I lived in a community where it was like that for everybody, right? Like, it was just a very, very working class community. Everyone's working hard and trying to get by. But
Mm.
I would see my parents like fighting about paying, how are they going to pay for the rent? How are they going to put food in the fridge? And to me it seemed normal at the time, but I didn't realize how much that was imprinting itself into my mind, and it was literally shaping my mind. It was creating these tendencies of anxiety, these tendencies of sadness, these tendencies of a scarcity mindset. I just didn't know how to process that, and when I went to college, all these emotions just came up really strongly because I was uprooted and put somewhere else. So I didn't have my regular friend groups and whatnot to, like,
Hmm.
I don't know, just help de stress. And I ended up turning to drugs and alcohol to just like numb myself and remove myself as far away as possible from the pain, from just even
Mhm.
acknowledging my emotions. And that led to a rock bottom moment where I almost lost my life. One night where I took too many drugs, and then in that moment, it shook me awake. It felt like if I keep going, I'm going to die.
Yep.
And the only option is to just do the opposite of what I was doing. So I have to pay attention to my emotions. I have to tell myself the truth. I have to stop doing drugs, and I need to rebuild my life and make myself healthier.
All right, so that's a tall order. It's
Hmm.
interesting. I have a similar story of just the addiction piece, of stopping young, like having the realization in college. Because
Mm.
I had a therapist who confronted me about my drinking and basically said, "If you don't stop drinking, I will stop seeing you." And I
Wow.
was like, "Damn, can she even do? Your therapist could just break up with you like that,
Yeah.
But of course, it changed the trajectory of my life. So for you, how was it being like eyes wide open minus the numbing at that young age?
It was so hard. It felt like I was riddled with fear, like a fear that sat next to the sadness and anxiety, because it felt like I had these demons inside of me that felt so scary, almost like a child, like when you look at shadows in the night and you're like
Yeah.
scared that it's something. But that's what it felt like as, in my
Mm,
in my early 20s. And then I knew, I was like, well, I have to challenge myself. I have to challenge myself so that the next time the anxiety comes up, I don't just go and roll another joint. I need to just, I need to sit with it. And it's interesting because it was before I started meditating,
mhm.
and my sort of intuition was like, okay, let me just like feel it. Let me just sit there and feel it. And I would literally sit on my bed, anxiety would come up, sadness would come up, and I'm like, I'm sitting there doing nothing, eyes open, and I'm like, oh wait, I'm okay. I'm like, this doesn't feel good, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
And that's when everything just, I was like, okay, this is doable. It's possible. So the thing that I thought was a giant demon was tough, but it was, a very transitory, changing thing.
It's the life and death feeling that we have. It's like I always think about, I can always tell for myself and with clients, what is the child's fear? Right?
Mm,
So that big scary monster where you feel like, wow, if I confront this person, or if I say no to this, or if whatever the thing is that we're afraid of, it feels so life and death. And then you have an experience where nobody dies and the world doesn't stop spinning on its axis. And you're like, oh, wait, nobody's spontaneously bursting into flames. Oh my God, this is amazing. And I feel like that's the grown, in a way, what you're describing,
mm,
and just my lens, but is more of like the grown up you was
mm.
like, you can do this. And it's almost like telling the little kid, you like, I got it. We're going to do what we need to do to not be run by fear.
Yeah, and it definitely felt like it, and it felt like it was just an opening to a new chapter in my life. And when I sort of fast forward and about a year of like forcing myself to go out on long walks, like signing up to a gym, paying attention to my emotions, just doing these simple, basic things, because in that era of me running away from myself, I got incredibly unhealthy. I was like piecing myself back together and just like, starting a new life. And so that was the summer of 2011 when that rock bottom moment happened. And the summer of
Hmm.
2012 was when I started meditating.
Mm,
And when I started meditating, that's when like everything took off, because I was like literally cultivating the qualities that I didn't have, cultivating awareness, cultivating non-reaction, cultivating
mhm.
compassion. And that really kind of just took the growth to another level.
So let's talk about meditation. I'm
Mm,
also super into it. I'm a meditation teacher. I've been meditating for many, many years. It's
mm.
absolutely foundational for my life. Once I had started meditating, I started making all my therapy clients meditate because I really, for in my own experience, meditation bought me about 2 seconds of response time.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, you know what I
So
mean?
true. I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean. It's funny
Right.
because I haven't heard it down to a time, but I would describe it as like my mind felt a little more spacious, so I
Mm.
can see options as opposed to just impulsiveness.
Yes. And so I wouldn't hit send on that douchey email that I just wrote. I would just put that shit in draft and be like, you know what? If you still really feel this way tomorrow, you can send it. But there had been so much like hot-headedness and reaction, right? So there was no
Hmm.
emotional self-control prior to that, that there is something major. So tell me a little bit about, if you would, what drew you to meditation, who taught you to meditate, what kind of meditation do you do, what does your meditation
Hmm.
practice look like today?
I'm profoundly grateful to my friend Sam. I went to college with him, and we were part of the same friend group. And we were idiots together. Like we were, partying, like just like both of us pushing it to the edge. But he went to one of these meditation courses first when he was
Mm.
traveling through India, and I was shocked by how, the email that he wrote afterwards, and he was talking about how important goodwill is, how important compassion is, how love should be a part of our lives. And I was like, what the hell is he smoking? Like what is
Who
going
was
on?
that? Right. What happened to Sam?
Yeah. And it's funny because I looked up those emails and I saw the back and forth, and I could see how genuine he was. And I ended up signing up to a course 6 months or so later. And this was in the Vipassana tradition of SN
Mhm.
Goenka. And there's silent 10-day retreats. And you're basically teaching the mind how to observe reality as it is, to sort of
Mm.
pause, observe, feel, and not allow the past perceptions to make everything cloudy. It's a very gradual development that helps you become more equanimous, helps you become more aware, and it helps you just honestly make better decisions. That's been like the biggest result that I've seen in
Mhm.
my life is that when I meditate, and the time that I put into meditating is resulting in not just me feeling more at home within myself, but also
Uh,
just improving my relationships and making and streamlining work. I know what to say yes to, I know what to say no to. I meditate 2 hours a day. So I meditated an hour right before I came here to talk to you.
uh,
And I'll meditate again in the evening for an hour at some point, maybe sometime after 4 p.m. or before dinner or after dinner. It changes every day depending on what kind of work I have that day.
right.
And my wife and I will also go away to retreats where, not just 10 days long, but 30, 45 days long. And we'll be in silence. And that's where like the big cultivation happens. It's kind of like you take your mind, and it's like a football, and you just throw it down the field. And when you come out at the
Mm.
other end, you're just like a shinier, newer, like faster version of yourself, which is pretty fun.
Wow. So, Sarah, your wife, you guys met in college, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so you've been together for a bunch of years. So,
Mm.
how was she into it before, or was she introduced to meditation by you and just got into it with you?
Yeah, so she heard about it through Sam as well. I told her about the email that I got, and I was able to sign up and go. She was very interested off the bat, like
Mhm.
on her own, but I think she was working as a scientist at the time. So her schedule was way more strict. So she had to do her 10-day course 9 months after I did mine. And I
Mhm.
remember her honestly just waiting very impatiently. She was even more like less afraid, looking for a challenge, looking for something new. And so yeah, so she took to it on her own.
Interesting, because I do think just my own experience is that
Hmm.
sharing it with my husband, he's older than me, and he was into meditation long before I was, although he let me think I was reinventing the wheel, but he had been doing transcendental meditation back in the
Hmm.
day, that I can see, for me, there's a correlation, like, of us sort of being, sort of meeting in the unified field and being on the same page together
Mm.
with tending to our internal sacred spaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you feel like this affects your relationship as well?
Profoundly. I think the relationship that we had before we started meditating was quite chaotic, and
Mm.
we felt this magnetic pull to each other, but it didn't really fully make sense to us, like why we wanted to be together until we
Mm.
started meditating. And it's really funny because, you know, I have no proof if past lives exist or not. Like I don't have
Mhm.
any memories or anything like that. But I always say like if they do exist, then I was definitely with this woman and we were definitely meditating the same technique in a different context. Felt so right the way we were like, oh, we're supposed to live this life together and also, keep developing wisdom.
Mhm. So good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about How to Love Better. So this is your newest book coming out, The Path to Deeper Connection Through Growth, Kindness, and Compassion.
Mm.
So tell me, why this book and why now? And then let's talk about the book.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, so when I went into meditating,
Mhm.
I went in to save myself. Like I knew
Mhm.
that I needed to just keep reformatting my mind to keep building a newer, version of myself. And I was shocked because I didn't go into it for relational help. So when I went
Mhm.
into meditating and I started cultivating these skills of, listening to myself, telling myself the truth, being more understanding, seeing different perspectives, these were all, part of an emotional skill set that I needed to develop to help myself. But then when the meditation retreat was over, I'm like, oh, I can listen to my wife better. Like I can, I'm giving her more patience. Like I'm being more compassionate. And I was
Mm.
shocked, honestly, that putting time into doing my personal growth was just like really opening up almost like a renaissance in my relationship because it was a very big struggle between the two of us. And cultivating that self-awareness, like it's helped us, start developing accountability, to accept that,
Mm.
like, because I feel tension in my mind, that doesn't mean it's your fault automatically. And all these little things that developed over time. So to me, I felt like there's a very important bridge between personal growth and relationships and how they can help relationships be more harmonious. So I had to, write about it from my perspective.
I love it. And this book itself really isn't for, this is really not a book for people in relationships per se,
Yeah.
right? This is a book for human beings. Anyone who wants more self love, anyone who wants
Hmm.
more self improvement. So tell us more about what people can find in the book and who it's for.
Yeah, I mean, it's really for all of us because these same things that these tools that we try to build in intimate relationships with a partner, it's the same sort of skill set that you need with your best friend or with your roommate or
Mhm.
with, your parents. Because if you observe yourself long enough, you start realizing that whomever you're in proximity to, like whoever is
Mhm.
literally closest to you, that can be anyone, but that
Mm,
person is going to see the best of you and the worst of you.
mm,
And so that it takes a degree of acceptance that, yes, like I do need to bring gentleness and kindness into the relationship. I do need to cultivate a specific type of compassion where I can see more perspectives than just my own, that I can literally step
mm,
outside my perspective to see and honor the perspective of another, so that to you and use that as a bridge for problem solving. And the
mhm.
third being that growth is essential. It's not only an essential part of life, but the specific type of growth that you are responding to the mirror of relationships, because you'll see when you're in front of another person what you're good at and what you're not good at, and just embracing that imperfection and deciding, oh, right, I do need to cultivate a little more patience. I do need to cultivate a little more listening.
Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I look at relationships where one of the tenets I always think about is that we have to be responsible for our physical health
Mm.
because when we're not, it will negatively impact the other person, right? Eventually,
Yeah,
someone who is not
totally.
taking care of themselves. But what you're really suggesting and promoting and talking about in this book is the same thing for our psychological and emotional well-being, for our own ability to self-reflect. And that, really, when you think about it, it all comes back down to, in a way, your relationship with yourself, which is what this interview
Hmm.
started on,
Hmm.
talking about changing your relationship to yourself, changing your relationships to substances. How are you going to spend your time? What were you going to be doing? So whether people want to do this with other people or do it on their own, there's something about taking responsibility
Mm.
for our health, mental and otherwise, and taking responsibility for what are we bringing into the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard. It feels really hard to turn the lens inward when your attention just wants to focus on whomever hurt you, right? Because
Yeah.
there are going to be people who hurt you, but they're powerless to heal you. Like that can only really come from within you. So being able to accept that, and also understanding that anyone who arrives to any relationship is going
Mhm.
to arrive with imperfection. They're going to arrive with past pain. They're going to arrive with unconscious behaviors.
Yep.
And hopefully, they also arrive with the humility to want to learn. Like, I want to learn how to support your happiness because I may feel strongly for you, but I don't necessarily know how to care for you.
Right. That's a great point. So, what do you say about conflict or arguments in relationships? Right? Because even in
Yeah.
great relationships, right, people are going to have those things. How do you think that people can best handle
Yeah.
them?
I think the framework needs to be switched where we're not just trying to win the argument, we're trying
Mm,
to understand each other. Like an argument is an option for deeper connection, and you can take that option or reject it by just focusing on combat, which is like, when I when my wife and I would first argue, it was like a battle of who was most witty with their words and who dug their heels in deeper.
Yep.
And it was just constant blame, blame, blame. And
Mm.
it whenever you sort of fight in that mode or have arguments in that mode,
Mhm.
both people end up losing,
Yep.
because even the person who yields, there's resentment there. There isn't this, like, repair that is needed to be able
Yep.
to keep the relationship moving forward. And that resentment keeps adding up. So when you take away the idea of winning and instead focus on understanding, it
Mm.
becomes so much more productive, because then you honor the fact that you had a series of events that led you to this intense moment, but your partner also had a series of events that led them to that moment.
Mm.
So take turns, because I really believe what Thich Nhat Hanh says, that love is understanding. It is
Mm.
100% true. Like,
Yep.
love is understanding, and my wife and I have found this time and time again. When we really take turns sharing our perspective and the other person practice selfless listening, and they're
Mm.
really just like taking in the perspective, that slowly the tension evaporates, because it's like, oh, I see where you're coming from. I can see you now. And sure, one of us may have to apologize and whatnot, but it isn't like a fight for dominance. Instead, it's like, okay, let's settle into talking and seeing how we can understand each other and then move forward.
Yeah, really talking about making the distinction between having a dialogue and having a debate. Right,
Mm.
right. So with a debate, it's like, I just want to crush, I just want to win, I just want to
Mm-hmm.
make you admit that you lost. But really, with a real dialogue, what you're talking about is the understanding and attempting to. I also feel like in relationships that, like, caring about how the other person feels, even if we don't fully understand why.
Mm.
You know,
Yes.
right? My husband, there are plenty of times when I know he doesn't necessarily get why, but when you have a real compassionate love, he also knows I don't need to build a case
Yeah.
to prove that I have a right to how I feel. And if he loves me, he needs to give a shit about how I feel, even if he doesn't understand how I feel.
Yeah, and I think that's something that takes, like, intentional repetitive training. Like, I
Yes.
remember that there are times where, we'd be fighting and I'm like, why do I feel like I'm in danger? Like, I'm not in
Yeah.
danger. Like
Mm,
it's scary, because it feels like the potential for the home to fracture.
yeah.
But if you remind yourself, like, even though we are disagreeing in this moment, that's my best friend over there.
Yeah.
That's like the, most attractive person I know. Like, that's the funniest person I know. Like,
Hmm.
I need to cool it.
Yeah. Yeah, like, totally. That
Yeah.
reminding yourself, like, hey, that's my person. I always try to frame it with therapy clients as like, if we can look at it like, this is not you against me. This is
Mhm.
us against this misunderstanding, or this is us against this problem. Like, always feeling like we're choosing each other. It's always us. And if we can do it that way, it's almost like there's more power to figure out what the problem is when you don't feel like you have to lose in order for me to win.
Yeah, it's really helpful what we ended up learning about communication, because the mind is tricky and the mind moves really
Mm.
fast. And we found over and over again that quality that we mentioned earlier, where the mind feels tense. You wake up and the mind feels heavy for whatever reason, and some
Mhm.
anxiety is moving through. Maybe you're fighting off a little bit of sickness or something, and then immediately the mind starts looking for more cannon fodder. It, like, looks for, what else can I be mad about?
Yep.
How can I make this tension bigger? And
Mhm.
of course, whomever you're in proximity to, you're going to start focusing on this person. And then the mind is looking for arguments. And my wife and I have found that, like, so many of the arguments that we slipped into weren't really about each other. It was just that we were forgetting to acknowledge our own, like, dis-ease or heaviness, or whatever it
Mhm.
was that was going through us as individuals. And we ended up learning that it's actually way more productive to lean into preventive communication and to just, like, let each other know, like, oh, I don't feel good today. And then that helps
Mhm.
me know, and she's aware, and vice versa. Whenever she tells me that she doesn't feel good, I'm like,
Mm.
oh my God, great, thank you. This is like the information I need to know to, like,
Yep.
be success, to, like, be supportive of the two of us.
Yeah, no, that's so great. And again, the preventative stuff is so helpful. Being proactive to not,
Hmm.
and also knowing when am I most likely to not be a great partner? What is it when I'm hungry? Is it when I'm tired?
Yeah.
Similar to like being in recovery. Like, what is it? Or you have things that you're polarized about, which I see this in couples a lot. And obviously, I've been a couple for 27 years, so we have our own topics that can be like the hot topic.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about de-escalating? Like when something gets hot, what are your thoughts about de-escalating?
Mm. I noticed that, the de-escalating often comes from whoever has more balance in that
Yep,
moment.
yep,
And it's usually the two of us are not at the same level of heat. Like
yep.
sometimes, when I feel her heat, her tension coming, and I just feel relatively calm, like I can feel it, I can feel it in her words, and I know to hold us in that moment. And I'm like,
Mm.
tell me what you want me to, I want to hear what you have to say. And then as long as you're intentional about never accepting the invitation to be angry too, right? Where it's like I'm actually going to keep living in my energy, but I want to
Mhm.
hear you. Tell me everything you have to say.
Yep.
And she does the same thing too. It just depends on like whoever is just like a little more aware, honestly, in that moment,
Yep.
because we're not like driven by that heavy perception of whatever emotions moving through at the moment.
I love that. Vic and my husband and I have an agreement that whoever is cracking up first gets to be the person who cracks up. So you can't glom on and start getting hysterical about the thing I'm hysterical about. You
Mm,
have to stand for the relationship and be
mm-hmm.
normal, right? So again, it's sort of similar. Like whoever's losing it the most, they're going to get to lose it, while the other
Yeah.
person is like, I will be the stable. Okay, tell me
Yeah.
more about what you're feeling.
I
So
know. I
what?
love that. Tell me all your complaints. Let's hear
Just
them.
bring them to me. So what do you think in in writing this book and your capacity and your experience is sort of like the number one most important thing that people need to
Mm,
know to have healthy long-term relationships? Because people are always asking me this, and I'm
mhm.
curious to see your thoughts.
I think it's really going back to what we were talking about first. It's like you really do have to develop a strong relationship with your own emotional history. Like you have
Mm,
to learn like why are you shaped the way you are shaped? Like,
mhm,
why are your behaviors in such a way, how they relate to your childhoods, how they relate to moments of heartbreak in the past, and how that's affecting the way you show up as a partner. And pick up a healing tool, like whatever it is. Like if you like talking to an individual who's giving you more insight, like work with a therapist. If you
mhm,
like to, meditate and have your eyes closed, great, do that. If your thing is just being in nature, just do something that helps you cultivate yourself, because as you build the qualities that you need to feel more at home in your mind, those same
mhm.
qualities are going to help you are going to support you, especially during the down moments, because relationships are ups and downs.
Mm. Absolutely. Okay. So I want to ask you a question that is, I ask a lot of people on the pod because I'm still obsessed with boundaries. That's what my first book was about.
Mm.
So I love to hear people's answer too. Personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle and how have you overcome it if you have?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. A lot of that is honestly work related. It's like having grown up in such a scarce environment,
Yeah.
I feel like it's my primary trauma, right? It's like growing up in scarcity like that for honestly like a decade and a half. Um, it made such a big imprint that I know what it's like to not have anything. And
Mm,
so that makes me say yes way too much with work events, with, like, does this really make sense to go to this speaking event on the other side of the country? Like,
yep.
or is it better for me to just rest at home? So I think my primary boundary is like, I like to be productive, but also sort of shaping things well so that I'm not burning out. And because a lot of times when when you write books, you speak or you share things online, people will keep taking. People will keep like, they'll just keep asking more and more. And the
Mhm.
publishers will, if they could, like they'll have you going to 100 cities as if you were like a comedian or a musician.
Right.
And so I need to get better at saying no.
Ah, it's so good and it's so real
Yeah.
because this because I was going to ask you, and I don't know if your folks are your folks still here on this.
Yeah,
Plane?
yeah.
Okay. So how is it for them? I was thinking before, for you to be having this level of visibility and of success and of being celebrated in this
Mm,
way, coming from them sort of rolling the dice and gambling and
yeah.
taking this huge leap that they didn't know how to. So tell me, how is it for them?
I think in the beginning it was really peculiar because like, when I started getting my first sort of like accolades, when I first got on the New York Times bestseller, like they don't
Yeah.
read the New York Times, right? Their world is still in Spanish, so it means a little less to them. But there was this moment where the magazine that they read in Ecuador, they did like a full spread,
Right,
about
right,
like who I am and all this stuff. And they were like, holy shit. And they were like, this is for real.
right.
And as social media has grown over the years, my parents are on there too, and they see the numbers and they're so happy. And I spoke to my mom the other day, and she thanked me so much. She's like, "Thank you for helping us, for taking care of us." And like, she's like not having that stress at night when she lays her head on the pillow
I'm
to like
crying.
be worried about like if the fridge breaks, if X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z, like the unaccounted for things that you have to pay for, it just feels like a big relief to her. So I feel grateful. I'm like that's my job. I got to take care of my parents.
Yes, right on. Okay, so tell us. The book is out March 11th, so it's right now. It's available everywhere. So you guys, it's How to Love Better: The Path to Deeper Connection Through Growth, Kindness, and Compassion. And tell us, where else can people find you, Diego, aka Young Pueblo?
Yeah, so you can find me on the Young Pueblo account on Instagram. I'm also on Substack. It's one of my favorite places to release longer articles,
Mm,
and you can find my books in bookstores. So you can get it on Amazon or in a bookstore. And yeah, I hope this new one serves you well. How to Love Better.
I have no doubt it will. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. I so appreciate you. I so appreciate your work. Please keep doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Terry. Thank you so much.